Welcome to Backlit Productions. Today's story is going to be a little bit of my background and mainly my waking up moments. I'm still trying to keep everything anonymous, so some info will be left out, such as places and times and people's names, of course, in order to conceal identities. Later on, the videos will be a little bit more in depth of some of the stories that I think most people would be interested in hearing about. But for now, just a background, I grew up in a family of Jehovah's Witnesses, just us, not extended family. I was born in. I have two siblings. They are still in the organization. I grew up and was raised in the same congregation until I got married. And everybody knows that JWs get married young, unless you were blessed with more self-control and less lust than the rest of us. So I was married at 19. My mom had me convince her that it was a good idea. I had to write a pro and con list for the situation and about the boy in concern before she gave consent. And of course the things on the pro and con list were that he can give good talks and he's a pioneer. None of those topics are needed or important in a marriage, so you probably know how it turned out. We were pressured to get engaged. Since we were both young pioneers, it was explained to us that we were looked at as an example to the younger ones in the congregation, so we needed to make things official or completely break it off. They wanted us to make it quick so that we remained clean. I didn't know anyone. Actually, I take it back. I knew one couple who did not fornicate in some way before their marriage. They're sinners, all of them. But that did pressure us. They told us they would take away our privileges as pioneers if we took a long time to date. There was a night before we got married that we sat on my parents' porch to talk about the important matters of the future. I had no clue what those truly were until years later, of course. I told him I wanted to be a CO's wife. I wanted to travel and keep really busy. He told me he pictured himself more as a long-time local elder who knows everyone. I agreed that sounded okay too, but could we re-evaluate later on? This was also the evening when it was decided that we wouldn't have children. He used the same story as most people get to traumatize me out of having the natural desire to want to have children. He used all the same tactics that other people. You have a baby and suddenly there's some sort of just Gestapo coming around wanting to kill all Christians or get after Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're going to hold a knife to your baby's neck and ask you to renounce your faith. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You don't know what you're going to do. Are you supposed to keep your faith that Jehovah's going to resurrect that baby for you and just let it die? That's the thought. Therefore, we decided not to have children. We decided to stay childless for the kingdom. Soon after getting married, we got a vasectomy. So that was the first ignoring of the governing body's direction that we did, and it was a must. I could not keep taking birth control. It was very unhealthy for me. It was unhealthy for our relationship. It's just easier for a man to get a vasectomy. I don't regret it either. I don't regret not having children with my husband. I would have hated it. I know that. I never even really desired it. The only time I could bear the thought of it was in the context of paradise, and even then I didn't want to have children with him. Despite the 15 years together, I don't wish for him to have a child. And that's not the way to say that. Because of the 15 years that we spent together, I understand now that he shouldn't be a father. Mentally and physically, the history in his family is just not worth passing down to the next generation. Not only that, there's other reasons. It's just, I hope he doesn't have children, but I also hope that he's happy, no matter what he does. Anyways, the stories from my marriage to this man will need to be separate videos. They're just too much to condense into this today. So we'll fast forward 13 years. It's about 2016 or 2017. Stephen Lett gave us the new light on the generations teaching, or generations lie. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, squinting and holding myself so still because I thought that my husband would recognize any reaction, because honestly I was very confused and I didn't want him to catch how confused I was. It didn't make any sense. The old teaching didn't make sense, the new teaching doesn't make sense. I wanted to discuss it with him, but I shoved the thought down and decided I wouldn't talk about it with anybody. I could not wrap my mind around this new idea. It's not any way that anything has ever been understood to be a generation, so to me it was just make-believe. It was made up. The second biggest wake-up for me was watching a friend of mine from that congregation go through a long-distance relationship as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. She went from meeting, dating, to marriage all in 1 year. I'm sorry, that's wrong. All within 7 months. And once they were married, it was exactly a year later that they were divorced. And all of the things surrounding that relationship for her were just made more difficult because of the congregation. Nobody was supportive, nobody wanted to help, everybody just wanted to criticize her for where she met him, how long he's been baptized. He's not a ministerial servant. He's younger than you. You know, just like everything needed to be picked on, and it bugged me so badly. Why couldn't they just be positive and help somebody have a good beginning to their life? I was arguing her side of the story to my husband one day when we were going for a walk. He says that she didn't try hard enough to keep the marriage together. And I said out loud, maybe things just aren't that black and white. And he froze. That is essentially apostate talk. There are no gray areas, especially not for the layman to ponder over. We follow orders. We don't get to think about if it's black, white, gray, blue, yellow. We're told what to do. And what we do is stay married forever and ever. No matter how the relationship is, and no matter how happy the other person is, stay married. You made a vow. You made a vow to an invisible God who has never once done anything for you in your life. Sorry, back to the story of this friend. My view on that started changing when I realized marriage is just a trap, especially in religion and especially for women. If you spend all of your energy forcing yourself to look happy, you don't have much left for putting into your relationship. As one of Jehovah's Witnesses, most of your life is spent putting on a happy face for everyone else and trying to tell them that they should be exactly the same way or else they're going to die. I have to laugh. Moving on. Another wake-up moment was a conversation with that same friend, the one with the whirlwind 1-year marriage. We were discussing her disfellowshipped son and the fact that he was having a baby soon, and how she would never know her grandchild, and that it would for sure die at Armageddon, due to the fact that its father was disfellowshipped. What? I had never heard that before. I was speechless. I looked at her like she was crazy. Where did you get that idea? I said. Jehovah is not going to kill a child because its parent has his head up his ass. That's insane. Even with all of the knowledge that I have of the wars that Jehovah killed millions of people in, for all their sinning, it still shocked me. I argued this point for days. She kept showing me articles from the 50s, 60s, and 70s proving that the scriptures in Ezekiel and somewhere else, I might find them later, proving that those scriptures were teaching that a sinner's son, for generation after generation, will be punished. She stood by the teaching. I refused to be okay with a God that wouldn't give each individual a chance to prove their devotion. It was one of those interpretation things that just became fact, and I had to disagree. I told her, I don't care what the books say. I don't care what the governing body says on this. I do not worship a God who would kill a child just for what his father did. And if I was, I'm going to stop. I didn't actively start pulling away at that time, but looking back now, I definitely see the signs of my departure coming because of those things. I would have to say my final wake-up moment was after being disfellowshipped and after leaving my husband. I was still mentally in. I was still convinced it was the truth, and I was convinced I was going to save my boyfriend at the time. And he would be the first and only person that really mattered to save. And during the time of being disfellowshipped, I wasn't going to meetings because I figured there was no point because I was living in sin. So why bother going, right? Nobody's going to talk to you anyways. You're not getting anything out of it. I was just going to wait until we got married if we did. This was probably 10 months after being disfellowshipped. I was scrolling through Amazon looking for some things to shop for, and it gave me a suggested book. And I don't know why, because I've never researched any apostate literature or Jehovah's Witness anything on Amazon. But the suggested book was Leaving the Witness by Amber Scora. The book was amazing. I've never eaten anything up so quickly. She went through so many similar stories in her life. It felt so good to hear that someone else had the same thoughts as I did. And it was just shocking to see somebody do what I didn't have the guts to do yet. The biggest part of the book to me, and I'm just going to say spoiler, if you haven't read it, it's not a big spoiler, it's just something that she says, but this is a spoiler if you want to fast forward about 2 minutes. She says that she remembers sitting there in her apartment with her husband one night, and they're both separately doing their own Bible study. She's reading The Watchtower, and it talked about something, I think she said it was dress and grooming. I should have looked it up before talking about this, but something that was direction from the governing body in that Watchtower article made her look up at her husband and say, "Is this an effing cult?" Because the control, she lived in China at the time. She knew what control was. The control. That's what cults do. She said it out loud, and it gave it power. And that just, it meant so much to me. It took me a while still to say it out loud. But now I talk about it with people. I will talk about it with strangers now. I will say, I was in a cult, and I want you to know, if Jehovah's Witnesses ever come to you, decline them. But be nice, and ask them a question that will make them think. Ask them, if their Bible is so amazing, why are they the only ones who use it? Why have scholarly people and theologians not ever endorsed it and said, this is the best Bible ever? Everybody should be using this. That in itself should wake people up. It's because it's a cult. When I talk to people who are worldly, and I use certain words that I have to explain to them, that's a cult. Cults have special speak. Anyways, I'm going to leave this video there. There was one more thing I wanted to add. I just started my story saying I was born into a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. You have to understand, I was a full believer. I was a strong believer. I was a pioneer. For years, every single day, I did something for Jehovah, or something for the people in the congregation, or something to try and better my husband and I. And I was always so disappointed that he was a worse witness than I was. I was alone at meetings all the time. I went out in service alone all the time. I went to get-togethers alone all the time. All I wanted was for us to be better, and I prayed for that all the time from Jehovah. And I have to say, looking back, I don't remember one prayer he answered. Not one. I had one of those stories from being a pioneer that they make you ooh and ah and gush over at the assemblies that I told my boyfriend when I was trying to convince him to be a witness. One of those stories where you're a pioneer and you're poor and you come home and you don't know what you're going to do for the next day for gas to get out in service, and suddenly there's money. It's exactly what happened to me. Got a $15 check in the mail from some reimbursement. I don't remember if it actually went in my gas tank. I don't care now. It didn't matter. It wasn't a blessing. If God cared, he wouldn't drop us $15 here and there. Wake up to the ridiculousness. Anyways, I just want to say that I was fully in. I wasn't a wishy-washy witness. I was when I was younger. I hated my goody two-shoes older sister and my brother who would tattle on me for trying to just live and be a teenager. Bastard. I told my parents when I was in high school that I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. I told the counselor that, and the counselor tattled on me and told my parents. And so they made me start studying with my sister. And that supposedly just fixed it all, but all I did was discover what makes people happy, and it's better to see people happy than disappointed in you. I've not been myself for a lot of years. And I will also say, besides the point about that I was fully in, I don't regret growing up one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't. I think that I got a lot of good things out of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I saved myself from being very unhealthy, doing unhealthy things that would just take more of this life away. This life, which is the real life, might I add. It kept me safe from a lot of damaged relationships in a lot of ways. Even though you have your weird little things that happen within the congregation, everybody does, and I'll have some stories to tell about that. But I think it kept me from a lot of damaged and painful relationships. It kept our family close. I think my parents would have divorced if they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're happier now than they were before. I'm glad to have my family together. There were a lot of good things about being raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You're taught to be a good servant. You're taught to look for the things to do for others. Those are good qualities. But to go along with those qualities, you shouldn't be taught to depress your own talents and only go for the menial working jobs like cleaning toilets and such. Washing windows, oh my gosh, every Jehovah's Witness was a window washer, or some kind of janitorial. I cleaned houses. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that for this video. I've got some wet, juicy stories to come. I'm going to see if I have enough people watching after this one to make a request. Would you like a story about being a naughty teenager and getting away with it? Or a story from my lying, deceiving pig of an ex-husband, Jehovah's Witness, still in good standing? I leave it up to you. Or I'll just put out a new video next week. Thank you so much.